Hi again, everyone. My name is Marissa Davis. I am founder and principal of Tallawah Consulting, where again we work with mission driven brands to help them maximize their impact by ensuring that purpose, inclusion, and innovation is part of their core strategy. And as part of the work that we continue to do, I've rolled out a series called Tallawah Talks, where we feature the work and voices of individuals that in many ways embody and champion what it means to have inclusive impact. And so today, I'm so happy and privileged that we have Cassandria Campbell, who is joining us, another one of our social entrepreneurs that's been a part of our inaugural series focused on social entrepreneurship. And I am just so excited to have this conversation with her. So, as I've done in the past, just kind of give you guys a rough overview of who Cassandra is, and then we'll get right into the conversation. So, Cassandra, she became a food justice advocate as a teenager, first working at the Food Project. And over time, both as a young leader and after graduating from Swarthmore with a BA in economics uh, and yeah, following her time at Swarthmore, ended up being a youth coordinator back at the same organization. But she was eager to do more. So she learned how cities could best help communities access resources through her studies in urban planning at MIT. So she got a degree there. And then after graduating in 2011, she worked in affordable housing development, but was soon drawn back to the world of food. And that in many ways is what sparked her current work. She came up with the idea for fresh food generation out of a desire to find more real food options in her own neighborhood. And so much of this conversation, I hope, will be not only exploring the work that she's done with fresh food generation, but just her overall work and philosophy around social entrepreneurship. So very happy again to have you joining us, Cassandra, and let's just get into it. So first question off the bat, which is what I ask all the guests so far. What is social entrepreneurship in your own words?
Um, for me, it's about finding a creative solution to a problem in society. And the way that we do it as a company is we are actually a for profit. So we strongly believe that in the world of food, it's really important to have market solutions to food access.
Mhm.
There's like a lot of nonprofits who are focused on food justice issues and focused on food access, whether it's like a food bank or whether it's getting people to shop at their local farmers market or whether it's food education. We really felt like it was important that there were food businesses that were contributing to efforts to increase food access. So social entrepreneurship for us as a company and for me as an individual is really about you know finding a business solution to a problem that society is facing.
Awesome. No, and I think you, at least starting on the way you speak about just the food justice kind of world, people can approach it from different angles, right? So as you've spoken, people can take a non-profit approach, for profit, perhaps somewhere in between. So I would love to know why why did you find it important to take that market driven approach for the
Yeah.
specific part of the work that you're trying to advance?
So it was actually a journey for us to get to that point.
Mhm.
We initially, when the business was first just an idea, like we didn't have any physical infrastructure or food truck yet, right? It was just an idea. We registered as a nonprofit.
Okay.
And then we had a mentor who, ran a very large meal delivery program for elderly folks, and tried to incorporate as much local vegetables as possible into that meal delivery program, really push us to see how we could create a model that was for profit. And that was really scary to me at first. And it meant that we excluded ourselves from a lot of grants. But it also put us in a space of accountability that I have no regrets. So whether or not our business model is working often shows up in our numbers, right? So the level of accountability is almost, are we able to break even at the bare minimum, right? Are we able to pay people a living wage? Are we able to honestly and sincerely source from as many local farmers as possible, right? And, it's almost an experiment, right? A lot of people were like, how are you going to be a for-profit and make food affordable and provide it in low-income neighborhoods and create a living wages? I don't think we've figured it out. I don't think we're the perfect business yet, but I think that we are on that journey, and not only, trying to make sure that we're environmentally sustainable, that we treat people well, but we're financially sustainable, right? It has to be a model that can work in society.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And even as, just as you're speaking more, something that I think about is part of what you're doing is addressing a number of different problems, right? And in being a social enterprise or having a social entrepreneurial approach, you have to identify kind of that core messy problem that you're trying to solve. And so what is it for you? What is that specific kind of messy problem that you're trying to solve through your business?
The core messy problem has really been food access. So, I live in Boston. I grew up in a low-income neighborhood in Boston called Roxbury, one of many, believe it or not. And I noticed that depending on where you are in Boston, sort of dictates what access to healthy foods you have, whether it's like the supermarket or whether it's like private businesses that are selling quick, affordable food. So when I was at MIT in Cambridge, I could easily get something that was fast, healthy, tasted good, was very transparent about the ingredients. And when I moved back to my hometown, Roxbury, just over the bridge, it was clear that finding those food options was a little bit more difficult, right? I'd have to hop in my car to go somewhere else, or, I was visiting the same place over and over and over again because that was the only fast, healthy, affordable, cooked food option for me. So that was really at the core of the issue. And, the more time I spent as an adult, right? Not a teen, not a child, in my own neighborhood, was just realizing how many people were being impacted by health disparities related to food. And so the obesity rate in Mattapan, for example, is 30%, right? Compared to downtown area, Fenway, it's like 10%. And so that was the ultimate push of okay, this makes sense as a business, as a, something for me to spend time on.
Yeah. No, and clearly based on your assessment, and having grown up in these neighborhoods, something that you saw, just your intervention or partnership, could help to solve, perhaps not the whole thing, but at least just in part, having your contribution be an important complement to the work that is already being done there. Um, so could you walk me through more about just your journey? How did your journey as a social entrepreneur even begin, and how has it progressed?
So in 2014, it was like really just an idea. I was working in the world of affordable housing as an urban planner.
Mhm.
And, you know, in Boston, food trucks were illegal for a long time.
Mm.
And so they had just become legal, and my colleagues were like super excited about food trucks downtown, and we're sort of just like, okay, we're gonna try this food truck this day, that food truck another day. And I wasn't that impressed, but one day it dawned on me that we could use a food truck to do food access, and then I was obsessed. uh, and we spent 2 years sort of raising the money to purchase a food truck, acquiring the skills, because my background was not in the culinary arts, believe it or not. So, they call it staging in the restaurant world. So staging at different places, getting employed at different places to acquire the skills to be able to operate a food business. We did a Kickstarter, we raised $50,000, we purchased the truck, we got the truck out on the road, and we learned a lot. It's definitely, particularly in Boston, I think it's true across the nation, food trucks are highly regulated. And so a lot of the places that we wanted to go, we really couldn't be. So we did start in Roxbury, and the food truck did relatively well. It was enough to attract a new audience and to build followers, and to also start to build partnerships with public organizations and nonprofits. So we were able to collaborate with the Boston Public Health Commission, Codman Square Community Health Center, to get food to people at community events. And it helped us grow as a company, and it allowed those entities that were really trying to promote community health to have a food option available that was culturally relevant and healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And so over time, we started doing more and more catering, and that became a separate branch of our business. And it was sort of what we call community catering. And eventually we had a health center called Doc House in Dorchester reach out to us, and we submitted to become one of their vendors in their lobby. And this was a big deal for us because we were taking on another business model, because now we have a truck, we have catering, and we're opening up a small tiny cafe within a health center. And it was a really interesting experience because the previous vendor was selling Coca-Cola and hot dogs, and the doctors were not impressed because they would have patients come into their room and they would diagnose them with some type of diet-related disease or be working with them to overcome it. And they were carrying the soda and the cake from downstairs in the health center. So there was urgency to get a new vendor in. We moved in within 2-3 weeks of them reaching out to us, which was crazy. And slowly had to build the trust of folks there, and had to switch people over to different foods. For example, we no longer sold sodas, but
Gotcha.
we sold seltzer waters. And if you're used to having your Diet Pepsi or your Coke every day at 11:30, of course you're going to
Might
be
not cut it.
super frustrated, right?
Right.
So it was a journey to win that trust, and I would say eventually the best-selling item was our kale salad, and I would have never imagined that when we first moved in.
Wow.
Um, and then there was this piece as a business that we were struggling with, which was like making sure that we were being financially accountable and that we were paying our staff as well as we possibly could. One thing that we learned that in addition to the food truck, the cafe, and community catering, we started to do corporate catering, right? And I think that it's really important because I sometimes feel like as social entrepreneurs, we say like we can only help, our whole entire business model is going to be wrapped around helping people in need. And sometimes that is at the sacrifice of being financially sustainable, right? And so we decided to venture into corporate catering, and that helped us significantly. Our staff was happier because now we had this other revenue stream with a higher price point, and we were also introducing people to some of the issues that we were working with as a company. So like now folks in downtown offices are eating the same exact kale salad as folks, you know, in Boston's low income neighborhoods, and you know, they're both tied together and they're both connected to the same story.
Yeah. No, and I just in thinking about that, the tying to different communities, using food as a mechanism to do that can be a really powerful thing. And you had mentioned something about community catering. What is that? Is that different from just the usual catering process or something else?
So I don't even know if it's an official term. I have heard a couple of other groups use it, but like I think of community catering as, you know, sort of being for us, by us, and really making sure that it is serving the needs of people in my neighborhood and organizations in my neighborhood. So for example, some of the packages that we had was one of the most popular packages, and was Let's Eat Together. And it was chipotle chicken, herb chipotle chicken, rice, red bean stew, and a simple garden salad, right? And it was intended to be at $10 per person, which is like what most places can afford, and something really easy for people to go to the menu and be like, my group is getting the Let's Eat Together. Right. Opposed to some of like the corporate catering, which was like a fancy bag of chips and wraps and a water bottle for $15, right? Yeah.
Gotcha. So more so just around catering model kind of designed around the communities that you are closely serving, your kind of immediate target community.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And eventually the corporate folks, after they had the wraps and sort of trusted us as a company, they'd like move into the Let's Eat Together, and then that would become their first choice. So
gotcha. Yeah, no, that it sounds like part of that is also, you are mentioning when you all started in the health with the health center, building trust there, there's also an element of building trust, even with the corporate partners as well. And um, it sounds like trust is one of the core things that you has been part of your um, work. So how has trust played a role in how you have operated as a business, how you have shown up as an entrepreneur? Just any of
It's
that.
so important, right? Like when folks are eating your food, they are trusting that the food is safe, right? Like as a bare minimum,
Mhm.
they're trusting that you're gonna show up on time. So, you know, if someone placed an order, and it's for a board meeting, they're not going to be embarrassed in front of their boss or their board members that the food showed up late,
Mhm.
right? Um, Folks are trusting that what we're giving them and what they're putting in their body and what they're spending their last dollar on, right, actually tastes good, is going to make them feel good. And so it's really important to me that food always leaves the kitchen tasting good, right?
Right.
That's one level of trust that we operate with as a business. The second level is creating an environment where our employees can trust us, right? And that is really challenging. Um, we have 10 employees right now. 7 of them are full-time, 3 are part-time. And prior to the pandemic, trust was really important, but now in the pandemic, it's even more important. So try to keep an environment that is safe, try to keep an environment where people aren't continuously stressed out or in a chaotic workspace, which is very easy in the food industry.
Mhm.
The food industry is known for pushing people to their limits and working a lot of overtime. And so making sure that we are organized enough that people, when they wake up, aren't dreading coming into work because they were pushed to their limits the previous day, or because company culture isn't being upheld and um, there isn't an environment of cooperation or an environment where people have a voice and the ability to contribute. So it takes a lot to make sure food leaves the kitchen tasting good and make sure that our employees feel safe and happy at work as much as possible. And the two are very interconnected.
Mhm.
And it's so easy if you have a team that's tired and exhausting for the quality of the food to slip.
Absolutely. And I mean, some of even what you're saying, particular on the piece of safety, when you think about the mere definition of what inclusion means, it's, to foster an environment where people feel psychologically safe, right? So
Mhm.
you're speaking to safety that's both psychological, physical. It's more of a holistic look at it, but thinking about what is necessary to meet the needs of your employees, but then the communities at large, that the employees are also impacting through the work that they're doing. Um, there's another thing that you mentioned, and this was perhaps a bit earlier in our conversation. You grew up in the areas um, where you're still operating and working within, and the communities that you're serving are people that are familiar to you. You have a proximity to those communities in ways that perhaps other business owners might not. And when I think about just work in the social impact space more broadly, and even social entrepreneurship as a whole, there's sometimes an issue with proximity. Some of the individuals who are doing the work, or might be the funders, might not necessarily always be as proximate to the issues that the issues that they're working to address, through their point of influence or their sphere of influence. So how important for you, one, is it to be proximate to the issues that you're committed to addressing? And as a related bit, for those who might not necessarily be as proximate to those issues, but care deeply about doing the necessary work to actually help to change the circumstances or improve the circumstances of the communities that they're passionate about, what do you think it would take for them to operate in a way that is um, uh, more cognizant of the circumstances of the individuals that they're serving?
Yeah. The proximity for me, I think it's a huge, advantage, and it's also a very intense experience, right? We talked about financial accountability, but the proximity puts another level of accountability on our business. I live in the same neighborhood as a lot of my employees, right? And a lot of my neighbors or people in my community are also my customers.
Mm-hmm.
And so being in the same community, it's like, I never want to hear anything that is not productive about my business.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's in my best interest to make sure that we are always putting our best foot forward, because the last thing I want is to live in a neighborhood and operate a business in a neighborhood where people aren't excited about it, whether you're a customer or you're an employee.
Yeah.
And things happen. No business is perfect, but at the very least, we hope that we're creating a brand in a way that if we do make a mistake, people can feel like they can come to us and let us know, because the quality of our product and service has continued to be really high, and it was one moment in time and not a pattern.
Mm-hmm.
So that, I would say, summarizes the just intense experience of living in the same community. And the advantage is that I think a lot of folks just couldn't imagine what it would be like to operate Fresh Food Generation as a business model, whether it was like funders or investors or incubators that help small businesses. It was like inside secret knowledge that I had that was able to allow it to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so,
because I am our target customer in some ways, right? So like I can just reach
your market very well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And
what
perhaps,
do I want? What would I like to see?
Yeah. And in an even more intimate way, perhaps, to know some of the nuances, I guess, of what the different considerations that your customer might be having when they're trying to decide whether or not they're going to purchase your meal versus make any other decisions with their dollars.
Mm-hmm.
So then the other piece then, for the folks who are trying to do the work and do work that is oftentimes, in historically low resourced communities, and again, they have the passion and desire to do work respectfully and effectively. What do you think it might take to have a greater proximity, or to operate having that kind of consciousness or that awareness around the individuals that they're serving in the way that you have established.
Yeah. So I think allyship is really important. Like that's probably the most obvious answer.
Mm-hmm.
But it's acknowledging that you don't have that proximity, you don't have that natural inclination, and that's okay. You just have to figure out how to put people in a position to lead that. Like if I'm not if I don't have financial skills, I'm not going to keep our books, right?
Right.
I'm going to outsource it to a bookkeeper. And this, it's the same thing about, you know, providing services when you don't have those skills. Is like you want to get someone on your team who does, and put them in a leadership role. I would say like make sure that you are listening. The biggest example that I often see in the food justice world is I'll hear people complain about people not eating kale or not eating carrots and hummus. And it's like, well, have you ever thought of growing collards? Right? Like I know you've been growing kale for years, but folks don't want that. Or what's that popular green? The name is slipping my mind in the Caribbean.
Callaloo.
Callaloo, right. So that's something that people are familiar with. Maybe you should try growing that, but it's unfair to say, well, like people aren't eating the kale, there must be something wrong with it. And it never comes out in that type of language. It's usually like, oh, it's really difficult to get people to eat kale. Versus like, I need to change my behavior to align with the community and culture that I am serving.
Right.
And it's not carrots and hummus. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Within Caribbean neighborhoods, largely, yeah, not so much. Yeah. So part of what you speak about is this adapting to the circumstances and the realities of the environment that you're operating within. And I'm sure that as an entrepreneur, as a social entrepreneur in particular, you've had to adapt time and time again. So could you speak to perhaps a challenge or a harder lesson that you've had to learn that you had to adapt and adjust to?
Yeah, I feel like there's been a lot. I'm trying to think of.
One is fine.
Yeah, I mean, the corporate catering was a really big example of like, particularly like I didn't want to add wraps to the menu. And so we went like 2-3 years without having wraps on our menu as a company. And that closed doors to us. And so there's definitely a balance of like sticking to what you know, sticking to what you do best, and putting your faith behind that. And also just making sure that your model is sustainable. And sometimes that means that you have to incorporate something that you would not necessarily initially have desire to do in order to do what you love. Right? And so when we added wraps, it became like 40-50% of our revenue stream, right? And it wasn't like the same pie got split up into 50%. It was like wraps were added and our pie grew tremendously because of that, right? So we were doing more community catering, we were paying our staff more because we added this one item that I was so resistant to in the beginning. And it was a transition for our kitchen team as well, because like everyone in the kitchen hates doing wraps, or like at the very start of it.
Yeah.
Right? It's not something that's really eaten in the Caribbean. It's like
Right.
often focused on our corporate customer. And over time we learned to do it. And so we could do 1,000 in a week, right? So that was a good learning lesson, is just to like, in the same way I had to learn to listen to my community, I had to learn to listen to like our corporate customers as well, which are an extension of our community and just as important.
Absolutely. So you've just spoken to a challenge that you've had to adapt and navigate through. Can you speak to an accomplishment or something that you're really proud of?
Yeah. So this question may be coming down the line, but I think one of the things that we are currently really proud of is our ability to adapt and persist during the pandemic. It's very difficult for food businesses right now, and everyone's in a different place, and some people are able to adapt given their circumstances, and other folks, sort of throwing down the towel, saying that it's enough. They've lived their restaurant food life out. So for us, we transitioned into doing emergency food because we already had in our repertoire the skill set of bulk producing and selling it at a really affordable rate. And so the pandemic hit in April, and there were a lot of folks who were not able to access unemployment benefits, or the line to get those benefits was so long, it was weeks away from them actually, for that check actually coming into their account. And so I think across the nation, we saw really long food lines. And we also saw a lot of community organizations and government agencies step up to help those food lines. And so we had folks reach out to us to hire us to bulk produce food and make it available to individuals being impacted by COVID-19. And so it was definitely a transition, right, of learning how to operate a kitchen under pandemic constraints, right? So 6 feet social distancing, bringing translators in so that everybody on our team understands in their native tongue how to protect themselves at work and outside of work. And it also, at the same time, built on something that we were accustomed to do and became really good at, was, with very thin margins in the food industry, it's like 10%. Of doing it with an even lower margin or zero margin, but in a way that was still sustainable and kept our team employed and got food out to people. So we have continuously, nonstop, been providing emergency food. In some cases, we've even provided diapers. My investor was not excited about that. I kind of, it was what people needed in that moment. Right? And so we provided bleach, like just really listening to what folks need and making that happen. And so we're continuing to do that. And in January, we're partnering with Mass General Hospital and their Medicaid program to do home deliveries for folks who can't leave their house for different reasons, and to also provide groceries to a pantry and a high hit COVID area, the North Shore of Massachusetts. So really proud of our team and for making that transition.
Yeah, because I'm sure that
Yeah,
was not an easy transition.
not an easy transition. The other thing that we've started to do, just looking beyond, like, we want the food lines to end, right? It's not good for anyone. Um, we want the pandemic to end, and figuring out a model that sort of looks beyond where we currently are. And so we've started to focus on home deliveries.
Okay.
Um, and it's been really amazing because we've been able to be super adventurous with the menu in a way that we couldn't be before, because it's not just one person ordering food for a group of 30 or 500. Everyone's ordering their own individual food. So if you want spicy jerk chicken, you can order that.
Mm-hmm.
If you prefer something a little bit like more less intense, you can get the salmon, right? So we've been having a lot of fun in the kitchen with new menu items, and selling directly to customers and not selling to businesses to get to customers. Yeah.
No, that's just as you're saying, many businesses have fared differently, and that's awesome that you've been able to adapt to that. And that was going to be my other question, which you've already answered. So I guess my last question really is how, for those who are interested in either supporting you, your journey, your business, how can folks go about doing that?
So for folks who are local to Boston, they can definitely go online and order food that we will bring to your house.
Mm-hmm.
For folks who have family members or friends in Boston, you can order food as a gift for them, or a gift certificate.
Mm-hmm.
And for folks who have no ties to Boston, we are still doing food relief, and we're actually in the process of raising funds for community groups. So, for example, before Thanksgiving, we did a turkey drive, and we provided 280 turkeys
Mm-hmm.
to a charter school in Boston, the families for kids who go there. And that was all through like raised funds through our customers.
Mm-hmm.
So we do have like COVID-19 relief meals available on our website.
Okay.
That will go to support people.
Got you. So they can just go on your website and
Yeah.
give there. Got it. Awesome. Well, I mean, that I think is a solid way to um, end our conversation. Again, thank you so much for taking the time out to speak with me and to just share more of your story and your journey. I mean, especially during this time, I think food is life, and to be able to offer that service, not just for the communities that you've been serving for the past several years, but even beyond, I am sure is an appreciated service. So thanks again, Cassandra, and really enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks for having me, and really just a joy to see your business grow and see you help other people out. So thank you.
Thank you.